Is this the labyrinth city of Orrery? What a miraculous city! Standing on the towering hillside, Shiro Emiya looked at the huge and magnificent city in the distance, and couldn't help feeling emotional. Especially the white tower that goes straight into the sky, the Tower of Babel. It is impossible to imagine how it was built. The world where gods dance with the people of the underworld, the birthplace of heroes, Orrery. This place will definitely bring me the power to rival heroic spirits. At that time, I can defeat Julian so that they can no longer disturb Miyu's life. Thinking of his sister's appearance, Emiya Shiro's memory couldn't help but return to the past. In his previous life, he was a college student from the Celestial Dynasty named Wei Gong. Especially as his favorite series, he has watched almost all the works related to the Fate series. After all, whenever he, Emiya, sees another Emiya killing the quartet, and there are groups of girls around him, a full sense of immersion arises spontaneously. When Emiya watched the new theatrical version of Cup of the Sky 2, The Lost Butterfly in Battle B, he was once again shocked by Mata Sakura's tragic life experience. Among the heroines of the original novel, he prefers Mata Sakura to Tosaka Rin. After all, who doesn't like a big and gentle girl like Sakura? But her life experience is really tragic, especially the HF line with Sakura as the protagonist, it is even more terrible. So much so that Emiya, who was heartbroken after reading it, quickly opened Magic Girl Ilia and used the girl's stickers to purify her hurt heart. Then, by the way, he stayed up late to relieve the theatrical version of The Oath Under the Snow from Magical Girl Ilia, and then after falling asleep, he crossed over. When he woke up, he found himself lying on the pitted ground, surrounded by various broken swords and pieces of swords. And not far away, Angelica, the girl holding the deviant's sword, was watching him. Hehe, the start is to face the boss Hedon, and after being defeated, is there a worse start than this? The memories in my brain kept replaying. Emiya Shiro, Sakuzuki Miyu, Holy Grail War, Hero King. A lot of information kept emerging from Emiya's memory, making him quickly sort out his identity. Although he didn't need to remember at all, he knew when and where it was. After all, this information is engraved in the DNA. This is the ending of the Holy Grail War in Miyu Sakuzuki in The Oath Under the Snow, and it is also the beginning of Magic Girl Ilia. This is the story of the giant Emiya who, in order to save his sister, betrayed the ideal of a righteous partner, turned into evil, and ended the Holy Grail War overnight. And now, it is the end of this story. In order to buy time for his sister to be transferred away, Emiya Shiro faces Angelica, who is the incarnation of the hero king Gilgamesh, alone as a human. Although he lost the battle, he won the war. At this time, he was bruised and lying on the ground, happy that his sister had been redeemed. Infected by this feeling, Emiya also discovered the fact that he had already crossed over, but he had just woken up. Therefore, in terms of character, he is more inclined towards Emiya Shiro's character. After all, both are him, but one is the past life and the other is the present. Speaking of which, since the memory of my previous life can be awakened, there must be something interfering. Maybe it was the culprit that caused my reincarnation. But it doesn't matter what you are, whether it's a system or a god. Since you have awakened the memory of my previous life, you shouldn't let me be captured and imprisoned like this, right? Please, I need your strength now. Awakened by Emiya Shiro's heartfelt request, a golden light rose from his chest and gradually rendered the entire space. What it is? Aroused by the vision rising from Shiro Emiya, Angelica immediately assumed a fighting stance. A dozen golden ripples appeared behind her in an instant, and a dozen noble phantasms were ready to go in case of unexpected events. But before she could understand what was happening in front of her, her consciousness was interrupted. The space is frozen. Relying on his scarred arm, Emiya Shiro forcibly straightened his body and looked at the source where the golden light gathered. A golden pocket watch was slowly floating out of the golden light from his chest. Isn't this a fake pocket watch that I bought for dozens of dollars? Could it be that I found a treasure? Who would have thought that the culprit that caused the crossing of the Empress was actually the pocket watch he bought from a certain day and night? What is the difference between this miracle and the one that was picked up in vain? Looking at the golden pocket watch floating in front of his eyes, Shiro Emiya stretched out his trembling right hand to catch it steadily. Following the contact with the golden pocket watch, a message instantly appeared in his brain. It turns out that this pocket watch is called Moment of Distant Time, and it has the ability to take people through and integrate into the world perfectly. 17 years ago, it was this golden pocket watch that brought him to this world, but because his original three-dimensional body was not compatible with the two-dimensional environment, he found the best fit with himself from the thousands of worlds. Characters as reincarnation objects. In the past 17 years, the reason why he has not awakened is because his soul is gradually adapting to this world. Until this battle, the strong fighting spirit and consciousness made him completely adapt to this world. Now he is Emiya Shiro, not Emiya in the past. Is this the cause and effect of my time travel? It's safe to do so. Now I should think with Emiya Shiro's thinking. What should I do next? Looking around at the surrounding environment, and Angelica who was standing there without any movement, Shiro Emiya suddenly smiled and said, "Do you still need to think about it? Of course, you have to cross first. Now I don't have the power to fight against Julian and the others. The most important thing now is to gain stronger power." Emiya Shiro knows that in the plot after magical girl Ilya, Mayu Ilya and Emiya Shiro who returned to this world temporarily defeated Julian and the others. But after the battle, they used Emiya Shiro's body as an excuse to keep him at home. The battle that followed was carried out by Ilya, Mayu, Kuro, and Bazette. Thinking of such a future, Shiro Emiya was full of unwillingness. How could she let her sisters go to fight while she hid behind to rest? This is not the future he wants. Let's go a distant moment in time and take me to a world that can improve my strength. The crossing of the distant moment of time cannot specify the world, and can only choose a general direction, unless it is the world it has been to and has the coordinates of that world. Following Emiya Shiro's order, he was enveloped in golden light. Looking at the Hero King Angelica in the distance, Emiya Shiro said a little unwillingly, "Angelica, I have to say that you are stronger now, but I will come back to defeat you soon." Afterwards, Shiro Emiya disappeared in this space, leaving only Angelica who regained consciousness but did not know it. Waking up from his past memories, Shiro Emiya looked at Orari in the distance, and muttered to himself, "I hope you don't disappoint me, God's grace." Orari is the true center of the world. It has been more than half a month since Emiya Shiro came to this world. In the past half-month, he has been recovering from his injuries while inquiring about the characteristics of this world. After finally learning of the existence of God's grace from the hunter's mouth, he instantly understood which world this was. Is it wrong to seek encounters in a dungeon? Also known as the world of the wrong place. This is a world with demi-humans, spirits, and even gods. Here, the gods came to the world to seal their own divine power, and then established a family to live with the people of the lower world. The people of the lower world, inspired by the grace of God, drove the monsters back to the dungeon again, then established Orari, and finally kept exploring the dungeon to become a legendary hero. This is a world full of heroes. At the same time, this is also a world that is very much in line with Emiya Shiro's requirements, although the former Emiya Shiro used to end the Holy Grail War overnight with a string of sevens. But that is the case with the class card, even if it is a duel to the Hero King later, it is because of the supply of magic power from Mayu. And now Emiya Shiro, who doesn't have any augmentation, is just an ordinary person who has learned his magic circuit in advance. In the story of Magic Girl Ilya, when he confronts Niang Twink again later, he can't even open the infinite sword system again. Because he is only a mortal body. But if he obtains the grace of God, then he will definitely be able to gain the ability to confront and even surpass it. Therefore, he has been looking forward to Orrery for a long time, and now he is finally here. Through the inspection of Orrery's gate, Yashiro walked into Orrery's interior smoothly. The first thing that caught his eye was not the wide street and the lively surrounding shops. It's the white giant tower that sticks straight into the sky in the distance. In this era, such a building may only be built by gods. After savoring the magnificent building carefully, Shiro Emiya's eyes were attracted by the pedestrians around him. There are many adventurers wearing all kinds of equipment, some are wearing full-body armor, some are carrying bows and arrows, some are holding spears, and some are carrying long swords. Moreover, there are not humans, dwarves, orcs, little humans, and even elves that appear here. This is a scene that both Yashiro and Shiro have never seen before, a world that exists only in fantasy. Although I might get used to it in the future, for now, just appreciating the surrounding scene is enough for Yashiro to be excited. After a moment of admiration, Yashiro calmed down and went to find his goal. After a simple inquiry, Shiro walked to the corner of Orrery, where one of Orrery's two largest families, the Loki Familia, was located. For Yashiro, who has knowledge of the future, there are only a few families that he wants to join. In the end, after various exclusions, only the Hestia family and the Loki family are left. But he didn't even say that the Hestia family was not established, and he didn't even know whether god Hestia came to the world. The specific information needs to be inquired, but Shiro has no time to inquire. Now he is facing a very difficult problem, that is, he has no money. After all, he had just gone through a death fight before he came, and he had nothing on his body except an inexplicable pocket watch. Even after he came to this world, he was working part-time while recovering from his injuries, and only then did he collect the fare for coming to Orrery. Otherwise, he is still working part-time like Kazuma. So in the end, there was only one choice left for him, and that was the Loki Familia. As for the fact that the great family does not accept ordinary people, I have never been weaker than others in my entire life. After walking through the lively streets, he came to the Loki family's residence, and then under the guidance of the guard at the gate, Shiro came to the place where the Loki family specially recruited them. There are so many people. Looking at the 20 or 30 people in front of him, Shiro couldn't help feeling the influence of the Loki family. I'm afraid this scene is not like this every day. Attracted by the movement behind him, the sturdy young pig man who was originally in the last row turned around and looked at Shiro Emiya's body and said with a teasing, "Boy, with your body, it is impossible for the Loki family to recruit you. I'm just here to join in the fun." Looking at this muscular man who was 2 heads taller than himself, Shiro Emiya responded with a smile. "I'm a newcomer to Orrery. I heard that Loki's family and Freya's family are very strong, so I'll come and see. I'll go to Freya's family to see after they are eliminated." No wonder. Shiro didn't plan to have a conflict with this guy. Right now, he just wanted to join the Loki family and have a good meal. His last dry food had been eaten at noon yesterday, and now he is very hungry. Really? Indeed, the newcomer still needs to go to the great family to see more. It's not bad to gain knowledge. Saying that, he patted Shiro on the shoulder. "Shit, a kind of plant, can you be a little more energetic?" Even though his shoulders were aching, Shiro still laughed and chatted with the other party about Orrery's various situations. Soon, the registration team was in front of the pig man. After a detailed understanding of the 2 Loki Familia examiners, the other party seriously rejected his request. "Sorry, you are not the talent we need." The pigman youth, who was originally very nervous, lost his expression visibly to the naked eye. He thought he was very hopeful, but he didn't expect that he didn't even pass the first level. According to the process, the 2 auditors must first select suitable talents and report to Loki, and then Loki will personally select them. After all, most of the family attaches great importance to the internal atmosphere, and the Lord God treats the members of the family like his own children, so it is the Lord God who can finally make the decision. I know. The pigman young man walked aside very wisely and made way for his position. But he didn't leave, he was waiting for Emi Yashiro's test. After the exchange just now, he felt that the young man behind him was very interesting. Although there was no agreement, he decided to let the other party invite him to drink. In response, he even said to Emi Yashiro against his will, "Come on, boy. Thank you, I will definitely try my best." After responding to the pigman youth with a smiling face, Shiro Emiya, who had already understood the specific procedure, walked up to the two examiners and replied earnestly, "I have magic." "Well, your name is?" "What, you have magic?" Hearing Emi Yashiro's narration, the two censors stood up in surprise. "What you said is true." "Certainly." Emi Yashiro said flatly, "I think no one in Orari would dare to deceive the Loki family." The inspector's eyes lit up, and one of them immediately took Emi Yashiro to the Pavilion of Dusk. "Come on, I'll take you to see Lord Loki." Looking at Shiro Emiya, who was walking into the Loki family under the leadership of the censor, the pig man said to himself with a bewildered expression, "Liars, they are all liars, aren't you here to join in the fun? Why did you go in directly?" Unfortunately, reading www.yuyuganshu.com, no one has solved his doubts for him. In the reception room of the Twilight Pavilion, the red hair was neatly tied behind her head, and the extremely wealthy squinting goddess was sitting excitedly opposite Emi Yashiro. "You said you have magic, you don't seem to have joined any family yet. Magic is an extremely rare ability in this world. Except for the elves, it is extremely difficult for other races to obtain magic. Not to mention innate magic like Emi Yashiro. In a sense, the magic of this world is equivalent to the noble phantasm of the heroic spirit of the moon world, and it is the decisive force that can decide a battle. Yes, I haven't joined any family yet." Emi Yashiro stretched out his hands, and as the magic flowed, Emi Yashiro's signature weapon, Emosyat, appeared in his hands. "It's really innate magic. What kind of magic is this?" "Projection magic. Projection magic." Although Loki, who was muttering to himself, had never heard of such magic, it did not affect her decision. "I have decided, you will be the child of our family in the future. In this world, magic is divided into innate magic and acquired magic inspired by the grace of God. Innate magic involves racial blood and personal qualifications and has fixed attributes, which can only be learned by magical races through their own potential and practice. But Emi Yashiro is human. It is impossible for humans to acquire innate magic. This shows that Emi Yashiro has the aptitude of a magical race like elves, which is a rarer existence than elves. Such a person took the initiative to vote, how could she not be excited by Loki? Seeing that his purpose was achieved so easily, Shiro Emiya couldn't help but sigh. The existence of magic is indeed full of temptation. After coming out of the reception room, Shiro Emiya followed Loki's brisk footsteps and walked forward. According to her statement, this was to go to the god's room for a ceremony to write down the grace of God. It's just that when they came to the hall, Loki suddenly shouted, "Our family has a newcomer. Get the kitchen ready, we will have a banquet tonight." "Wow! A newcomer? It's really a newcomer. Looks like we can have a big dinner tonight." Attracted by Loki's voice, some of the family members who had gathered in the hall all ran over and surrounded Emi Yashiro in the middle. "What a handsome boy! Is he the magical child?" "Sure enough, Zed should be talking about him." When Emi Yashiro followed Loki into the reception room to talk, his information had already spread throughout the family. If it weren't for the fact that the large army was on an expedition, it was estimated that there would be more people around. Feeling the enthusiasm of the family members, Shiro Emiya, who has always been calm, felt a little nervous. It's true that these people are too enthusiastic. Looking at Emi Yashiro, who was a little shy, Loki burst into laughter. All right. If you have anything to say, wait until the evening banquet. Let's take this child to the god's room and give him the grace of God. Ha ha ha, let's have a big drink that night. After getting rid of the entanglement of the family members, Loki soon brought Emi Yashiro to the temple. Come on, take off your shirt, let's start. Without any hesitation, Emi Yashiro quickly took off his shirt and turned his back to his future master god. Once God's grace is bestowed, you will be our family, understand? Emi Yashiro, who turned his back to Loki, said firmly, yes, I am willing to be your family. Rather, Emi Yashiro really hopes to have more family members. Loki opened his eyes, stared at Emi Yashiro's back, and gently rubbed his right hand on his back. Then, she smiled and said, then the ceremony will begin. Having said that, she pierced her finger with a needle, and wrote the favor of the Loki family on Emi Yashiro's back with divine blood. At the same time, while she wrote about favors for Emi Yashiro, she also popularized the knowledge of favors for him. The essence of God's grace is a catalyst for the development of the possibilities of the children of the lower world. And the value generated by systematically parameterizing the favor is called ability value. It includes basic ability, development ability, and magic. The skill level represents the overall level of strength. What God's grace can lead out is the possibility of children, but the possibility of children in the lower world cannot even be understood by the gods, and this is the unknown that the gods pursue. Therefore, it is possible for children to have any strange magic and skills. Emi Yashiro certainly understands the nature of God's grace, and that's exactly what he needs. Because no one knows better than him how much possibility Emi Yashiro is a man. Not to mention the Emi giant who summoned his future self after the Holy Grail War. Emi Yashiro felt that perhaps God's grace could lead to other things in him, such as the traces of heroic spirits. The ceremony of bestowing God's favor soon came to an end, and Shiro Emiya clearly felt that Loki had written the favor on his back. But she didn't speak for a while. Have we found a golden egg? Looking at the ability value behind Emi Yashiro, the excitement on Loki's face grew even higher. This kid is definitely a hero. Let's translate your stats into common language and see for yourself. Also, we've locked your stats, but because there is something like a lockpicker, don't let others see your back. Understood? Of course Shiro Emiya, who knows the importance of intelligence, will not take the initiative to reveal his intelligence. Then, he took the paper that translated the stats into common language from Loki, and looked at it seriously. Name, Emi Yashiro level, LV.1 abilities, strength, I0 durability, I0 dexterity, I0 agility, I0 magic, I0 development ability, magic, infinite sword system projection magic inherent enchantment structural analysis the chant, As the sword is born in heaven blood is like steel and heart is like glass across countless battlefields without defeat although I haven't been defeated but it didn't win either to be alone broken ice on the sword hill. However, this life is not over yet even if it is a fake also made by the sword skill, thousands of tests the weapon attribute is increased when holding a weapon forged by yourself self-forging, accelerated growth affected by the forging characteristics. The above effects are greatly improved Is this your initial panel? 1 magic and 1 skill. Before the unlimited sword system, he had some expectations, but what happened to all these trials and tribulations? Is it because Emi Yashiro was destined to live a life of hard work? Or maybe it was because of the traces of heroic spirits. As we all know, although the Emiya giant is nominally possessed by the future Emiya, in image it is a collection of many heroic spirits related to Emiya Shiro. There are parts with red A, parts with Xiaoan, parts with Muramasa, and parts without inscriptions. Could it be that the traces left by Muramasa were let out? Whatever the reason, the appearance of this skill was extremely important to Emiya Shiro. Look at its 3 explanations. The weapon attribute is increased when holding a weapon forged by yourself. You must know that the weapons in Emiya Shiro's inherent barrier are actually forged by him. Although they are magic products, this fact cannot be questioned. Perhaps in the future, every weapon in his inherent barrier will surpass the original. Self-forging, accelerated growth. This one is even more important. He will greatly increase the growth rate of Emiya Shiro. Bell, the protagonist of the original novel, officially stood out only after he had longed for this accelerated growth skill. Therefore, for Emiya Shiro, who is looking forward to being stronger, this is the most important thing. Affected by the forging characteristics, the above effects are greatly improved. This last one is even more simple and rude. By increasing the level of forging characteristics, the first two bonuses will be more powerful. It seems that after all, he wants to follow the path of Kyunza village and become a blacksmith. Gently put down the paper in his hand, Emiya Shiro's mouth kept rising. This was even smoother than I imagined. Looking at Emiya Shiro, who was snickering on the side, Loki immediately stepped forward and hooked his arm around Emiya Shiro's neck, pulled Emiya Shiro in front of him and said with a smirk, "It looks like you are very happy. If that's the case, it seems that as the protagonist of the banquet for a while, I'll give you a good meal." "No, Lord Loki. Stop struggling, you can't run away." Having said that, Loki hooked Emiya Shiro and walked out. She was even happier than Emiya Shiro. With Emiya Shiro's qualifications, I am afraid that he will soon become famous in Orrery. She had never seen such a skill that could increase the growth rate. Maybe he can overtake from behind, and maybe the three of Finn, Riveria, and Gareth become LV.7. Even surpassing Oda is not a dream. At that time, I will definitely be able to overwhelm that woman Freya. Thinking of this, Loki couldn't help but laughed grimly. That smile was so sinister. Where is this place? Why am I here? Gently raised his arm on his forehead, looking at the unfamiliar ceiling above, Emiya Shiro, who was still awake, was murmuring to himself in a daze. But he soon woke up and remembered what had happened. I was drunk and then sent back? It's really a bunch of animals, really trying to get me drunk. Although he complained, Emiya Shiro sat up with a smile on his face. It's been a long time since I felt this feeling. Ever since Maya was taken away by Julian, I'm the only one left in my family. And loneliness is uncomfortable for anyone, let alone Emiya Shiro, who is born with a lively life. According to the fate of Emiya Shiro, Shiro Emiya, who has nothing to worry about, will become Red A and usher in the end of remorse. And whether he chooses Saber, Rin Tosaka, or Sakura Matu, he will never become Red A. Therefore, he likes this lively in the family from the bottom of his heart. This is another reason why he chose the Loki Familia in the first place. It has more of a family flavor here. Sitting up from the bed, feeling the warmth of the sun shining on him through the window, and looking at the somewhat shabby room, Shiro Emiya said with a chuckle, "It seems that the room needs to be arranged by me, but here it is. Go get the equipment first." Last night's banquet was not just about drinking. Emiya Shiro also learned about the benefits of newcomers through the seniors in the family. The first is funding. Any newcomer can get a starting capital of up to 100,000 farleys to buy equipment, so as to improve their chances of survival and upgrade efficiency. Under normal circumstances, the starting capital of 100,000 francs is definitely enough for newcomers. If it is a special situation, you can also borrow some more FAs from your relatives. But the extra is to be paid back. After all, the family cultivates partners who fight together, not rice bugs that they enjoy unilaterally. The second is the cultivation of combat skills. But Emiya Shiro doesn't need this, he's not a pure rookie who knows nothing. Finally, there is knowledge and information. In the Loki family, there is a huge underground library, which contains various books and materials for the members of the family to study. Emiya Shiro intends to study this part in the future. After a brief tidying up, Shiro Emiya came to the hall and got his initial capital of 100,000 francs from the senior who managed the property. Don't think that 100,000 francs is a lot. You must know that in the pub where the protagonist of the original book often goes, thousands of francs are needed for a meal. 100,000 PF is just a month's meal. Although 100,000 Fairies are not many, they are enough to purchase equipment for beginners, and for Emiya Shiro, it is more than enough. Emiya Shiro, who possesses projection magic, does not need to buy elite weapons, which are usually a large expense for purchasing equipment. Secondly, he does not need to wear armor. Emiya Shiro only intends to buy a set of wallets. Even if he had to wear armor in the future, it would be light armor that would not affect his movement. In addition, just in case, prepare a spare weapon. After all, dungeons are full of dangers, the most famous of which are abnormal events. No one knows if he will encounter an abnormal situation in the next moment. If he encounters an abnormal situation on his way back, he will easily lose his weapon due to the depletion of magic power. Therefore, spare weapons are still needed. After coming to the shop introduced to him by the seniors of the family and reporting the name of the Loki family, Shiro Emiya quickly completed the preparations. A leather armor, a spare dagger, and a backpack. This is all the equipment Emiya Shiro bought. After replacing the remaining funds with some practical potions, Shiro Emiya completed all the preparations. As for your own room, it must wait until the money is available to arrange it. Afterwards, Shiro Emiya took advantage of the time spent in the purchase, and strolled around the neighborhood. It was not until evening that he returned to the residence of the Loki familiar, the House of Twilight. How about it, Orari is pretty. Loki, who was sitting in the courtyard enjoying the shade, saw Emiya Shiro returning, and waved to him and greeted him. Well, Orari does have a different kind of beauty than other cities. Emiya Shiro has naturally never seen other cities in this world, so he is comparing the city where he lived before, Fuyuki City. Compared with the modern city, Orari, who is full of gods, does have a different kind of beauty. Yet, in this world, the most beautiful one is indeed Ulari. He patted Emiya Shiro on the shoulder with a smile, and Loki continued to ask with a smile, since the equipment has been purchased, when are you going to go to the dungeon? The relatives of the gods have different development directions because of the different wishes of the main god. Some specialize in selling medicine, some specialize in selling alcohol, and some even run prostitution halls. The development direction of the Loki familiar is to explore the dungeon. Wait for 2 more days. I'm going to go to the underground library to find some books about dungeon information. After all, knowing yourself and knowing your enemy will win every battle. Really? Just have your own plan. Then I won't waste your time, let's go to dinner. Looking at Loki, who had returned to his seat to enjoy the coolness and waved his hands to him, Shiro Emiya smiled and returned to his room. I always feel that Lord Loki and Sister Fuji are somewhat similar. Emiya Shiro, who couldn't help comparing Fujizan and Loki in his mind, quickly shook his head, put his backpack back in his room, and went to eat in the cafeteria. After all, the sky and the earth are big, and eating is the biggest. 2 days later, Emiya Shiro, who had already made all the preparations, left the Dusk Pavilion early in the morning and went to the dungeon alone. The reason for going alone is naturally that he refused to accompany his seniors. Although some seniors plan to take him to adapt, Emiya Shiro is not a pure newcomer. Having experienced the growth of the Holy Grail War, although his body is still mortal, his combat experience and methods are not comparable to the real LV.1. After fighting with his seniors, Shiro Emiya was qualified to travel alone. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com now, when all the troops are going on expeditions, it can be said that he is not a weak existence in the family. Of course, this is without opening the inherent barrier. Walking on the deserted street, Shiro Emiya felt the silence at this moment, but it was only temporary. As he got closer to the location of the Tower of Babel, there were more pedestrians on the road. They are fully equipped adventurers and supporters. As for the supporter of the auxiliary team, Shiro Emiya does not need it, he can be the supporter himself. When he came to the Tower of Babel, the surrounding area was already filled with surging crowds. Many adventurers gathered in groups of 3 or 5, as if waiting for their teammates. Some of these people have relaxed expressions, while others are full of depression. But regardless of their mood, they were fully armed. After all, no one can underestimate the dungeon. In the labyrinth, any laxity will lead to his own death. Hey! With a light breath, Emiya Shiro walked through the crowd and came to the entrance of the dungeon. It was a huge hole, like a well. Emiya Shiro and many adventurers entered the cave through an artificially constructed device similar to a construction site elevator. After going down the spiral staircase, he finally reached the first floor of the dungeon. Standing in front of the entrance, Emiya Shiro took a brief look at it, then took out a turban from the backpack behind him and put it on. Coupled with his red leather armor, at this moment, he seemed to have returned to the Holy Grail War in his memory. Projection begins. The familiar feeling came back, and the Qadr Emosya was held tightly in Shiro Emiya's hands. Then it's time to fight. Unexpectedly bright, this was Emiya Shiro's first impression of the dungeon. There are narrow passages, forks, and caves of various shapes everywhere, and the fighting environment here is extremely unfriendly to adventurers with long weapons. Fighting in this kind of environment is really unfriendly to newcomers. The pressure of the environment and atmosphere, and the sense of crisis of monsters appearing at any time, I am afraid that those who are not in good quality will soon lose their combat effectiveness. But that's for ordinary newcomers. For Emiya Shiro, who has experienced the Holy Grail War and fought against legendary heroes, there is nothing to be afraid of. Perhaps his body is still a mortal body, but his spirit and will have long been tempered into a warrior. How could the environment of the mere dungeon make him have a negative impact? Crack! With a strange sound, cracks suddenly appeared in the walls around Emiya Shiro. Through these cracks, new monsters crumbled to the ground. The newly born ones looked at the tall figure of Shiro Emiya standing in the center of the passage, howling in their mouths, and surrounded them like Shiro Emiya. Is this the so-called living dungeon? Looking at the scene where the mother in the dungeon gave birth to a monster, Shiro Emiya couldn't help recalling the description he had read in the book. The dungeon is alive. The monsters born in the first few floors of the dungeon are mainly goblins and earth spirits. And now it was the legendary goblin who appeared in front of him. They have sharp claws and sharp fangs, and new adventurers will be injured by them if they are not careful. Is this a monster? Finally, there is an atmosphere of an adventure world. With the two swords in his hand, Shiro Emiya rushed towards one of the goblins. He didn't intend to obediently wait for the other side to surround him. The current Emiya Shiro is not very good in terms of physical fitness, and even in terms of physicality, he is far behind those orcs. He is able to surpass other adventurers because of his rich combat experience and mature combat methods. As for magic, how much magic power does he still have once he uses the inherent enchantment? It was a protracted battle in the dungeon. This was where he needed to get used to it. Now he is not the time when Miyu provided magic power. Rushing in front of this goblin, Emiya Shiro raised his sword and dropped it, instantly ending its life. How fragile, but that is the characteristic of goblins. Even newcomers, as long as they have enough caution and courage, can easily defeat them. Therefore, for newcomers, the most important thing is mentality. After beheading this goblin, he ignored the monster that turned to ashes, and Shiro Emiya turned his head and rushed towards the other monsters. You can simply deal with them all Oneo none, so why do you need more means to fight Onetomani? The speed of the goblins is not fast, and the closest to Emiya Shiro are the two already gathered goblins. Immediately after rushing forward, Emiya Shiro kicked a goblin away, and then threw a weapon at it. After beheading the remaining goblin with one sword, the goblin that was kicked away in the distance has also been inserted into the ground and turned to ashes. Projection begins. Instead of picking up the thrown weapon, Emiya Shiro directly reprojected a new weapon to make up for his lack. Looking at the 3 remaining goblins, Shiro Emiya rushed forward calmly. Get rid of them all quickly. Sure enough, the first floor is for rookie adventurers to adapt to the environment. This is not the battlefield I need. Picked up the 6 magic stones on the ground and carefully put them into the backpack behind him. This is all money. In this world, because of the popularity of magic stone products, magic stones are almost synonymous with money. Magic stones are also the main harvest of adventurers. Magic stones obtained by hunting monsters can be directly exchanged for farley in the guild on the ground. Therefore, the magic stone is money. These 6 magic stones are about 1,000 peri, enough for 1 meal. Emiya Shiro, who carried his backpack and cleaned the battlefield, stepped back into the dungeon. For him, the first floor was simply too simple to exercise. Although the bounty of this world is very similar to the panel in the game, it is not obtained by hunting monsters to gain experience. The improvement of God's grace attribute is achieved through exercise. The basic abilities of God's favor are divided into strength, durability, dexterity, agility, and magic. If you want to increase your strength, you have to exert force. If you want to increase durability, you must withstand attacks. If you want to improve dexterity, you must make your body move. If you want to improve your agility, you must run with all your strength. If you want to increase your magic power, you must use magic. Daily exercise can also improve these attributes, but it is far less than the speed of actual combat with monsters. There is great terror between life and death. Only in a real life and death battle can the full potential of an adventurer be unleashed. For Emiya Shiro, the monsters on the first floor are no different from training in the family, so he needs to go deeper into the dungeon. The 8th floor of the dungeon. This is the area where the killer ants are located, and it is also the area where the largest number of killer ants are born. In a dungeon, sometimes such monsters are born on several floors, but as the number of floors goes deeper, the number and frequency of monsters are constantly increasing. The 8th floor is the area with the largest number and frequency of killer ants. Clang! The 2 swords crossed, blocking the attack from directly in front, and Shiro Emiya, who had been looking around, kicked it away, and then slashed at the other killer ant that was already approaching him. A swift sword cut off his arm directly. Ignoring his roaring cry, Emiya Shiro chased after him and attacked, 2 short swords in his hand like a juggling act, slashing at a strange angle and directly decapitating him. But it wasn't over yet. Shiro Emiya turned around and rushed towards the other 2 killer ants on one side. Surrounded by so many killer ants, he didn't have any panic and fear. Facing the monsters in front of him. Rushing to the side of the 2 killer ants next to each other, Emiya Shiro calmly blocked the attack of one of them with his left sword, and then pierced the other killer ant with a close sword. Then he leaned back without any pause, and rammed the killer ant behind him with his back. At the same time as he rammed into it, the left sword that was originally used to block was retracted and stabbed back with his backhand. Bang! The killer ant that was hit by Shiro Emiya on one side of the wall was completely unable to fight back, and was pinned to the wall with a sword by Shiro Emiya. As the left sword was drawn again, the killer ants behind Emiya Shiro had turned to ashes. What followed was the sound of the magic stone falling to the ground. Looking around at the few killer ants around, Emiya Shiro, who was slightly out of breath, decided to fight quickly. Emiya Shiro, who stomped lightly on his feet and rushed towards the killer ants again, easily harvested the single monster. Only a few gathered together required some effort from him. Facing the murderer ants that leaped towards him, Shiro Emiya also jumped forward. As he whirled in the air, he directly threw the 2 weapons in his hand, penetrating the bodies of the 2 monsters. He then reprojected his weapon in the air and slashed at the last 2 killer ants in midair. With a flash of sword light, the two killer ants had already been split open and turned into ashes. Emiya Shiro, who was half squatting on the ground, slowly stood up, turned around and looked at the battlefield he had just now. In the dark passage, the ground was full of shining magic stones. It seems that there will be a good harvest today. Leaning against the wall, Emiya Shiro, who was panting lightly, smiled happily. A narrow dungeon, in a chaotic passage. Emiya Shiro, who slashed the last monster in half with one sword, sat wearily on the ground, panting loudly against the wall. It has been a long time since he entered the dungeon. It is difficult to judge the specific time in the dungeon, so he decided to return to the surface. He gained a lot from this day's battle. In terms of material gains, the backpack behind him was already half full. In terms of combat experience, he is also more and more calm. The experience he had learned from Yinglingwei Palace before was the experience of fighting against people. The battles in the dungeons are almost all battles against monsters in the form of Warcraft. A day of fighting made him more experienced. It's time to go back. Feeling that only 20% of the magic power was left in his body, Shiro Emiya didn't plan to fight anymore. For magic, he is both dependent, but not very dependent. Dependency is because his weapons are all projected by consuming mana, and without mana, he would have no weapons. It's not so reliant because, if it's just a projection weapon, it doesn't need much mana at all. And after projection, it can be used continuously. But that's no good for exercising magic. If he only uses one weapon all day, his magic power will grow very slowly, making it difficult to keep up with the improvement of other attributes. This will slow down your upgrade speed in the future. This is what he does not allow. He simply cleaned the battlefield, packed up the magic stones and dropped materials, and Shiro Emiya walked back. There were no unexpected incidents on the way back. Emiya Shiro returned to the ground smoothly. Is it already evening? It seems that I am very engaged in the battle in the dungeon. Walking out of the cave, Shiro Emiya looked at the sunset and couldn't help but chuckle. He unexpectedly likes this kind of life rhythm that is completely different from his previous life. Go to the Union first and replace the magic stone with Farley. After sighing for a while, Emiya Shiro went to the trade union. In the trade union's money exchange, Shiro Emiya, who exchanged all the magic stones for francs, got 20,000 francs. Looking at Farley, who had caught up with 1/5 of his initial capital, Emiya Shiro said with emotion, as expected, adventurer is a rich career. But it's also a profession that spends money very quickly. Thinking of the scene he saw in the Hephaestus family's weapon store, any weapon would cost tens of millions of pharaohs. Shiro Emiya really likes his magic. It's great not to have to buy expensive weapons. But it seems that I have to learn the technique of forging too. On the way back to his family, Emiya Shiro couldn't help thinking about his future. According to the effect of thousands of tempering, the stronger your forging characteristics, the stronger your growth rate and your weapons. This skill can be called his core skill, and it will be the cornerstone for him to become a top powerhouse. However, the forging characteristics can only be obtained by a blacksmith, so he also needs to learn the forging technique. It is related to his growth rate. He must learn the forging technique as soon as possible, and then acquire the forging characteristic at LV.2. Then where should I go to learn the technique of forging? Carefully recalling the information about the world of Earth in his mind, Shiro Emiya decided to go to the Hephaestus family to learn the technique of forging through the introduction of the family. The Loki family and the Hephaestus family have a very good relationship. Not only is the relationship between the two main gods good, but the two family members have a very close cooperative relationship. In the future, in order to fight the monsters that corrode weapons that appeared in the dungeon expedition, Tsubaki, the leader of the Hephaestus family, went with the senior blacksmith of the family. From this, you can see the closeness of the relationship between the two families. Looks like I'll have to ask Loki after I go back in the evening. Thinking of this, Emi Yashiro couldn't help but smile bitterly, always feeling that he was taken good care of by Loki. Night. After dinner, before Emi Yashiro went to look for Loki, he was first called by Loki to the shrine. As soon as he entered the room of the gods, he was urged by Loki to push him to the seat that renewed the grace of God. Hurry up and take off your clothes and sit down. Let's take a good look at how fast you grow. Loki, who has never seen accelerated growth skills in a hurry, pressed Emi Yashiro on the seat impatiently, while not forgetting to complain. Let me tell you, we are a big family, and many people want to renew their God's grace every day, so it's not bad that each person can renew it once a week on average. If it wasn't for everyone on the expedition, how could you get the opportunity to renew your favor in 3 days? With such a good opportunity, you still have to be urged. Loki scolded Emi Yashiro while updating his stats. Soon, Emi Yashiro's ability value was updated. How is it possible? What kind of growth rate is this? Staring at Emi Yashiro's back, Loki lost his voice in surprise. In this case, I'm afraid you will be able to meet the prerequisites for becoming LV.2 in less than a month. Although Loki was shocked by the speed of Emi Yashiro's growth, she still did not forget to translate it into common language, and printed it on paper and handed it to Emi Yashiro. Name, Emi Yashiro. Level, LV.1. Skill, Strength, I-6-7 Durability, I-5-1 Dexterity, I-5-8 Agility, I-6-3 Magic, I-8-6 Development Ability, Magic, Infinite Sword System Projection Magic Inherent Enchantment Structural Analysis The chant, the sword is born in heaven, blood is like steel and heart is like glass, across countless battlefields without defeat. Although I haven't been defeated, but it didn't win either, to be alone, broken ice on the sword hill. However, this life is not over yet, even if it is a fake also made by the sword skill. Thousands of tests. The weapon attribute is increased when holding a weapon forged by yourself. Self-forging, accelerated growth affected by the forging characteristics. The above effects are greatly improved. Isn't it the same? Of course Emi Yashiro knew his terrifying speed of progress, but he couldn't help laughing at Loki's shocked expression. Sure enough, hearing Shiro Emi Ya's Versailles-like remarks, Loki screamed, "This is no change? Do you know the impact of this progress?" The basic ability of adventurers is divided into 10 levels from 0999, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, S. As long as the basic ability reaches C or above, they can be upgraded. Don't look at the fact that the upper limit of a single basic ability is only 999. You must know that the fastest way for the entire Orally to reach LV.2 is RI Carbon, but it took her a year to succeed. But look at yourself again, Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Just one trip to the dungeon, your overall value has increased by more than 300 points, and the magic value has increased by more than 80 points. If this continues, you are afraid you can become LV.2 in a month. At that time, all the gods of Orary will be shocked by you. Maybe there will be countless conspiracies surrounding you at that time. You're still disgusting that it hasn't changed. Looking at Loki's excited expression, Emi Yashiro said with a smile, "Why, are you afraid?" He knew that Loki would never care about any conspiracy or tricks. This person must have other thoughts in mind when he said this. Sure enough, upon hearing Shiro Emi Ya's question, Loki's shocked expression suddenly turned into an extremely sinister smile. "Afraid? We are Loki. I have never obeyed anyone when it comes to playing tricks and tricks." After she finished speaking, she patted Emi Yashiro on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Shiro, you are doing very well. I am very satisfied with such a growth rate. I remember that your skills need forging characteristics. I have been with Hefi. Stoth has said that you can go to her to learn the technique of forging at any time." Seeing that Loki had arranged everything for him, he didn't need to mention it himself. Emi Yashiro felt a warm heart in his heart. "Thank you, Lord Loki. Listening to Shiro Emiya's thanks, Loki directly hooked his arm around his neck and said with a smile, "You're welcome. Don't forget that we are family. You just need to grow up well and shock the gods with all your might. I can't wait to see those guys' jealous eyes now." Looking at Loki with an exaggerated expression, Shiro Emiya said seriously, "Yes, I know. I will definitely work harder." The 9th floor of the dungeon. In the intricate passage, a young man is killing all directions in a cave full of monsters. Holding the 2 swords, he kept waving the weapon in his hand, and every time the 2 swords in his hand waved, a monster's life was harvested. Carrying a heavy backpack, he showed no signs of being affected by his agility, as if he had no weight on his body. With agile feet, he moved left and right among the monsters, like a willow swaying in the wind, making it impossible to catch his figure. With his eyes and ears listening to all directions, he closely watched all the movements of the enemy. Even though his strength was already on the verge of being crushed, he still did not have any contempt. With no blind spots in his field of vision, he can always understate the enemy's attack into nothingness. Or block, or dodge. At this time, he was completely different from the one he was 10 days ago. This figure is none other than a newcomer to the Loki family, a traveler from another world, Emiya Shiro. After removing the last monster, he turned around and looked at the magic stones scattered on the ground. Emiya Shiro's mood became more and more happy. Today is another day of good harvest. With the passage of time, Emiya Shiro at this time has reached over 600 in any basic value, and the magic attribute has reached over 800. This makes him extra light when facing these former opponents. For the past 10 days, he has been fighting on the 8th and 9th floors, and has no intention of entering the 10th floor. After all, from the 10th floor, he will enter an area full of fog. The terrain there is wider and the field of vision is limited, and such terrain is still somewhat dangerous for him. After all, Shiro Emiya has a very clear understanding of himself. Don't think that he once fought through the Holy Grail War overnight, but that's all in the past. Right now, he is just an ordinary magician who has learned the inherent barrier in advance. Now he is unexpectedly similar to Bell, the protagonist in the original book. Not to mention the growth rate, both of them are kryptonite players with first-level weapons. Whether it's Bell's Hestia blade, or Emiya Shiro's projection of the able-bodied Moi, they are all magical weapons that are far beyond what adventurers of their level can use. In terms of magic, if you don't use a big move like the inherent enchantment, your own fantasy collapse should be able to surpass Bell's flame volt in power. Coupled with my own experience in mythical wars, I understand that I am the protagonist of the enhanced version. Jokes aside, Emiya Shiro was worried about his lack of combat power, so he didn't intend to go to the 10th floor. But now, he feels the time is ripe. But before that, he needs to go to the Hephaestus family to learn the forging technique. Although Loki had already arranged for him to learn the forging technique, Shiro Emiya didn't immediately go to learn the forging technique. After all, his hardware was not enough at that time. Just kidding, he was just an ordinary high school student before. How could he have the physical strength to do that kind of heavy work? Without physical strength, learning forging techniques will only get twice the result with half the effort. But now, with all attributes above C, he is completely qualified. Let's come here today, go to the Hephaestus family tomorrow to learn the forging technique, wait for the learned forging, then sprint with all your strength, keep going deeper, until you level up. Emiya Shiro already has a plan in mind for his future direction and path. Now, I just need to follow the pre-planned path. After some twists and turns, Emiya Shiro returned to the ground smoothly. Although the settings of this world are very similar to the game, there is no teleportation device, and everything walks on 2 legs. This is really a bad review. Not to mention that he is still under load. The reason why he is a part-time supporter is just for training. With his combat experience, it is difficult to be hit by monsters, so the increase in durability is also the slowest among all the values. But with the load, although the growth rate is not much faster, it is still stronger than without the load. As the saying goes, no matter how small a mosquito is, it is still meat. As for what to do in danger? Once the inherent barrier is opened, no danger is considered dangerous. If it weren't for the fact that simple killing would be of no use in improving one's abilities, Shiro Emiya would have already reached the middle level. After putting away the purse that had just been exchanged for Farley, Shiro Emiya, who walked out of the Union, took a deep breath of cool air. Sure enough, it's still better on the ground. Looking at the vast world on the ground, Shiro Emiya couldn't help but complain, the environment of the dungeon is too depressing. Although it is not as dark as imagined, the terrain of the cave is really too narrow. People who have lived in caves for a long time will not be in good spirits. Let's hurry up and enter the 10th floor. From then on, the terrain will be much wider. Carrying a purse full of harvests, Shiro Emiya did not return to his family immediately, but went to the shopping street to make some purchases. After these 10 days of hard work, Shiro Emiya now has a lot of Farley in his hands, and now he is not the poor and impoverished self. Now that he has a lot of spare money in his hand, he also began to decorate his room. Perfect. After some arrangement, Emiya Shiro's room suddenly became warmer. Emiya Shiro is extremely satisfied with the room he has set up. After all, he is an X-level housekeeping ability. Lying comfortably on his soft bed, Shiro Emiya couldn't help but recall his sister Miyu Sakuzuki. I really want to bring Miyu too. Recalling the good times in the past, Emiya Shiro quickly fell asleep in a daze. This night, he slept very sweetly. Is this the residence of the Hephaestus family? It is indeed the most famous blacksmith family of Orrery. Looking at the building in front of him that was no worse than the Loki family Dusk Pavilion, Emiya Shiro walked into it with a guilty conscience and asked, "Is there anyone?" "I'm Emiya Shiro of the Rocky family." Greeted. "Yo, are you the member of the Loki familia who wants to learn the forging technique?" Hearing Emiya Shiro's shout, a black-haired, reedied woman with a blindfold on her left eye appeared in front of him. "I'm Tsubaki from the Hephaestus family. The Lord God has given me the matter of your forging skills. I didn't expect that Miss Tsubaki taught me personally, I'm really grateful." Emiya Shiro knew the identity of the woman opposite very well. She was at the pinnacle of the Hephaestus family and was the most powerful blacksmith in Orrery. She is the head of the Hephaestus family, Tsubaki. Looking at Shiro Emiya, who respected him very much, Chun stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "You're welcome, our two families are good friends, and it's been a long time since I saw Finn and the others." How are they? How are they?" Emiya Shiro touched the back of his head and said embarrassedly, "I'm just a newcomer, and I haven't seen the head of the group since I joined the family." Indeed, Shiro Emiya has only joined the Loki familia for half a month, and the main force of the Loki familia from the expedition has not yet returned. Chun patted his head regretfully, "Look at my memory, I didn't expect to stay in the forging room for so long that I forgot about this kind of thing. Finn came here to buy things before he left." After she finished speaking, she said boldly, "Let's go, boy, let me teach you the forging skills myself. This is the true biography of the first blacksmith of Orrery, you must study hard." "Yes, Tsubaki-sama." Emiya Shiro responded quickly. Following Tsubaki's figure, Emiya Shiro soon came to Tsubaki's exclusive forging room. Putting on his forging suit, Tsubaki asked Emiya Shiro, "How much do you know about forging while playing with the stove?" "Not much, just some basic knowledge." Even these basic knowledge was learned through the books in the underground library of the Loki familia in the past 10 days. "It seems that you are a pure novice. But it doesn't matter. Forging this kind of thing is not as difficult as you think, especially for adventurers." After warming up the stove and making preparations for weapon making, Chun turned his head and explained seriously, "The most important thing in forging is your strength. If you can't beat iron, you can't do anything. It's an easy task for an adventurer. Other techniques and the like are very simple. You just need to remember the specific process. For blacksmithing, apprenticeship can be easily achieved. But if you go further, it will depend on your personal perception. In the end, forging is a technique that is easy to learn but difficult to master. The beginning is very simple, but how far you can go depends on you. Taking out some prepared materials, Chun continued to explain, the forging process can be summed up in 5 steps. They are molding, adjusting, smelting, casting, and post-casting processing. As long as you master these 5 steps, you can become a qualified forging apprentice. Next, I will actually practice it for you. You have to see it clearly. Yashiro hurriedly focused and devoted all his energy to observing the forging of weapons. Although he understood the basic forging techniques from books, no matter how much he read in books, it was not as effective as a practical operation. Looking at Tsubaki's tempered skills, Yashiro gradually became addicted to it, as if he was destined to be a blacksmith. Once a person is addicted to something, time will go fast. Soon, the weapon that Tsubaki had built had been released. Looking at the dagger in her hand, Shiro became more and more excited. "Can you show me this sword?" "Of course, no problem." Taking this dagger from Tsubaki's hand, Yashiro was very calm on the surface, but he was even more excited in his heart. After deftly turning the dagger a few times in his hand, Shiro activated his magic. Construction analysis begins. With the connection of the magic circuit, Yashiro already knew the structure of this weapon very well. Projection begins. With the flow of magic power, a dagger identical to the one forged by Tsubaki appeared in Yashiro's hand. With the formation of the projection, many experiences related to the casting of this dagger were read by Shiro Emiya. When Yashiro copied the weapon, he could even read the experience of the owner of the weapon. If it weren't for the fact that what he projected were all noble phantasms, and there was no forging experience attached to the real sacred relic, he would not need to come to Tsubaki to learn the forging technique. The experience he read on the dagger made his understanding of blacksmithing become more thorough, and it also solved many of the problems in his mind. But at the same time, more doubts were born. "Is there anything you want to ask?" Tsubaki asked curiously with his arms crossed. She did not ask about the activation of Yashiro's magic. Tsubaki knew very well that it belonged to Yashiro's personal secret, and generally no one would tell it except the members of this family. "Certainly." Yashiro responded eagerly. For the next few days, Shiro studied forging techniques here at Tsubaki. With his affinity for forging technology and his coherence like sheeting, his learning progress is extremely fast. He has already left the apprenticeship in a few days and can complete forging independently. Tsubaki was amazed by such a talent. If Shiro was not a member of the Loki family, she would have kidnapped him no matter what. Finally completed, my equipment. Looking at the equipment in front of him, he made with his own hands, Yashiro's eyes were full of satisfaction. This is a well-made light armor piece, somewhat similar in form to the light armor that Belle got for the first time. However, the difference is that this light armor is red as a whole. I don't know if it was influenced by the heroic spirit Yashiro also likes this color very much. The reason why he chose light armor is because Shiro considers the environment of the dungeon. Especially after the 12th floor, monsters began to appear in groups. In that case, there is no physical attribute that can be absolutely crushed, and it is difficult not to be attacked by technology alone. And he is not one of those high-level bosses, who can physically resist monster attacks. Once hit, he will be injured. Therefore, armor appeared in his consideration. In fact, since he left the apprenticeship, he has restarted his exploration of the dungeon. He has already set foot on the 10th, 11th, and 12th floors, and he can do it with ease. But starting from the 13th floor, the sudden increase in monsters made him a little overwhelmed. It was not because of his lack of strength, but because there were too many opponents. Although he successfully dealt with his opponent after that, he himself was seriously injured. This is also the reason why he changed his armor, and it is also a preparation for future battles. Now he has reached the limit in terms of basic ability. Surprisingly, the upper limit of his basic ability is not 999 for S level, but 1199 for SS level. Now he can no longer improve his basic abilities, he needs to upgrade. In other words, he is about to start his own adventure. In the morning, after putting on his equipment and everything was ready, Shiro Emiya walked out of the Dusk Pavilion. He has made all the preparations. On the balcony of the Dusk Pavilion behind him, Loki was lying on the balcony's guardrail, admiring his heroic appearance. Is our future hero finally going to start an adventure? Adventure is the name of the people of Orrery for the great achievement. If you want to improve your level, you must take risks, that is, to defeat dangerous enemies. This kind of dangerous enemy does not refer to a powerful enemy, but an enemy that is dangerous to adventurers. LV.2 monsters are naturally stronger than LV.1 ordinary adventurers. Ordinary adventurers only need to defeat LV.2 monsters to obtain great achievements and become LV.2. But what about the heroic characters? They were already able to kill LV.2 monsters in LV.1, so can LV.2 monsters still bring them danger and great achievements? Unable. In layman's terms, taking risks is to defeat an opponent who is stronger than you. This is why almost half of the adventurers in Orrery are LV.1. Because they didn't take risks. So for Emiya Shiro, what is the danger and what is his greatness? Loki didn't know. Therefore, for the battle that Emiya Shiro is about to face, she can only return the highest blessing. I wish you a prosperous martial arts. Walking briskly on the street, Shiro Emiya always feels that the wind is very comfortable today. At this time, he didn't have the slightest nervousness that he was about to take an adventure. On the contrary, he was in a very happy mood. Taking risks is extremely dangerous to others, but also extremely cautious. But for Emiya Shiro, there seems to be nothing to worry about. Adventure? What kind of adventure can catch up with the adventure he once broke through the Holy Grail War overnight? Great career? What kind of great cause can catch up with the record he once wore 7 times? He is a replica of the heroic spirit. He is also a magician who transcends heroes. A hero is a symbol of greatness in itself. If even he who has crossed many heroes can't cross the great cause, then who is qualified to achieve the great cause? As a replica of a heroic spirit, a hypothetical hero, Emiya Shiro decides to become a true hero. Walking through the dungeon, Emiya Shiro was in a completely different mood from other adventurers. The next journey was also extremely difficult for him, but he still felt very peaceful. No nervousness, no fear. Just move forward. Looking at Emiya Shiro, who was clothed in fine weaving, although he was not familiar with him, it did not affect the envious glances of the adventurers around him. Hwajing weaving, that is the standard for the middle layer in a sense. The reason for this is all because of the appearance of a monster, the Hellhound. Cerberus, also known as fire-breathing demon, is a monster that uses ranged magic to attack. The flames it spews can easily turn unprotected adventurers into charcoal. The fine fabric with flame and high temperature resistance is the best protective equipment to protect adventurers from the threat of flames. Therefore, it is easy to draw a conclusion by seeing the adventurer who is clothed in fine weaving. Dressed in fine weaving equals exploring the middle class equals advanced adventurer. Ignoring the envious eyes of other adventurers around, Emiya Shiro kept going deep into the dungeon. The monsters born in the upper layer can no longer cause him any trouble, so his destination is the middle layer. More specifically, the 17th floor where the floor master is located. Of course, he can never beat the floor master, after all, the gap between the two is too great. The owner of the 17th floor is Gloria, a monster rated as level 4 in combat power. With his LV.1 fighting power, trying to defeat Gloria would be a fool's errand. Therefore, he decided to follow the path of LV.7 of the fierce Oda, a single expedition. Of course, Oda is a real warrior who went on a solo expedition to the 59th floor, and fought against the LV. And he only needs to step into the 17th floor, and then fight back. At such a distance, Emiya Shiro was embarrassed to call it an expedition, so he named his operation, a small expedition. Standing at the passage from the 12th floor to the 13th floor, Shiro Emiya tightened his backpack tightly. This time, his backpack was very full, it was filled with supplies, and there was no space for magic stones. This time, it's just for fighting. Tightening the turban he was wearing on his head, Shiro Emiya muttered to himself, "The next step is my adventure." Having said that, he walked into the dark passage ahead. The grey rocks rolled down everywhere, the surrounding walls, floors and ceilings were all made of rock discs, and there was a little damp air. At first glance, the environment here seems to be a natural cave located on the mountainside. Such a fighting environment made Emiya Shiro seem to have returned to Mount Enzo, the place where he once fought. But now Emiya Shiro has no time to sigh about these things. At this time, he is running and fighting non-stop. With a swift sword, the one-horned rabbit in front of him was split in half, and then he turned around and slashed the stone axe thrown from a distance to one side. This is a monster unique to the middle class, called the unicorn rabbit. Although they are not particularly powerful monsters in LV.2, they should not be underestimated. They are capable of throwing stone axes and will cause you fatal damage if you are not careful. And this maze was originally the opponent's natural arsenal, and the falling rocks on the ground would turn into sharp stone axes in their hands, and they would come in a steady stream. What's even more overwhelming is that there are too many of them. From the middle tier onwards, the refresh rate and number of monsters are beyond the reach of the upper tier. Monsters will appear in a steady stream, consuming your stamina, and then waiting for the opportunity to strike you with a fatal blow. This is the living dungeon. Therefore, Emiya Shiro must not give them a chance to encircle him. He has to keep running and keep moving down. In this expedition, he will also use his true means. Emiya Shiro, who had already figured out the mid-level route clearly, kept running and fighting without a single pause at his feet. All the monsters that stood in his way fell in front of him. Roar woo woo. Although he has been running, Emiya Shiro has never slackened his investigation of the surroundings. Long before the voice came, Emiya Shiro had noticed its figure. It was 3 calf-sized wolf monsters. That's the Cerberus. The Cerberus perched on one side did not rush up, but stood on the spot, raised his lower body, lowered his upper body, and stored flames in his mouth. The sparks that were about to erupt overflowed from the crevices of its fangs. Too slow. At this time, the 2 swords in Shiro Emiya's hand had turned into a black longbow, and 3 arrows were poised on the bowstring, ready to go. Collapse. The sound of the bowstring flicking, accompanied by the sound of breaking wind, rang out in this silent space. Before the flames in the mouths of the 3 hellhounds could be ejected, Shiro Emiya was hit on the head. The flames that cannot be ejected can only explode in place, leaving no bones of their own. But Emiya Shiro no longer has the energy to take care of this. After the arrow was shot, he swung his longbow and knocked the nearby unicorns flying. There are too many monsters in the middle. Carrying the longbow on his back, he reprojected his double swords, and Shiro Emiya continued to move forward. The reason why he didn't disarm the longbow is just to save the use of magic power. After all, in the next battle, the bow and arrow will inevitably become his frequently used weapon. Influenced by the grace of God, Shiro Emiya's projection magic has been enhanced at an epic level. In the past, his projection sword weapons were normal consumption, non-sword weapons consumption was doubled, and armor types were doubled. But now the projection of any weapon is normal consumption, the consumption of swords is halved, and the consumption of armor is doubled. This makes his staying power even stronger. Don't hinder my progress. Looking at the monsters rushing towards him in the passage in front of him, the magic power of Shiro Emiya quickly turned on. Projection begins. With his order, more than a dozen sword suits were projected, and then they were shot frantically. With the blessing of magic power and the sharpness of the weapon itself, each sword outfit pierced through the bodies of several monsters, instantly clearing the passage in front of them. And the use of projection weapons seems to herald an increasingly fierce battle. On the road that followed, Emiya Shiro kept running and waving the two swords in his hand. Facing the monsters that came one after another, he kept beheading them. Either cut with a sword, or shoot with a bow, or shoot with a sword, in short, all kinds of means are frequently used. But even so, he was still left with different wounds. The attacks of the monsters were too dense, and there were always attacks that Shiro Emiya couldn't stop. The unicorn rabbit's stone axe throws, the Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com Cerberus flame jet, and the rugged rat's spinning sprint. There are always attacks that he cannot resist. But that still couldn't stop him from moving forward. Soon, Shiro Emiya followed the road sign in his memory to the passage from the 13th floor to the 14th floor, but a large number of monsters had already gathered here waiting for him. Is this the gift that the dungeon has prepared for me? It's really rich. He took off the longbow he carried on his back, and started to project his right hand. Projection begins. A strange long sword appeared in Emiya Shiro's right hand. This sword was not a double-edged or single-edged sword, but a sword with a spiral structure, which seemed to be only for stabbing. Pseudo-spiral sword. Putting the projected sword outfit on the bowstring, along with the flow of magic power, the original sword-made weapon actually began to change, turning into an arrow that shone with silver light. This time, Shiro Emiya stopped after a long absence and filled the bowstring in his hand. Fantasy collapsed. I saw a flash of red light, and the arrow's shot crossed a long distance and instantly came to the group of monsters. Boom! A violent explosion swept out from the monster group, instantly surrounding the entire monster group. The huge explosion drove the storm to swept all around, and many monsters that were not within the range of the explosion were blown out by the powerful storm and fell into the passage. When the explosion dissipated, the raging flames kept burning in place, and the cave that was once crowded with monsters was full of magic stones. Emiya Shiro passed through here with a flat face, without even taking a single glance at these magic stones. In this way, we entered the passage to the 14th floor. 13th floor, breakthrough. The 18th floor of the dungeon. After some tidying up, the Loki Familia, who were stationed here for a night's rest, are gathering. Ah! I can finally go back. We've been out for a month this time. Looking at the passage leading to the 17th floor, Tiona said with anticipation on her hips. Indeed, we came out this time for a little longer than usual, but the harvest was still very good. Looking at her younger sister, Tiona, who loves her family very much, the older sister, Tioni, thought about it and concluded. What does it mean to grow a little longer? Is it okay to grow a lot? Dissatisfied with her sister's statement, Tiona ran behind Ace, leaned in her ear and asked softly, "Where is Ace? Do you miss Orari's life?" "No, I still want to keep fighting," Ace said without any emotion in her voice. "Oops, I asked the wrong person, Ace is a fighter." Tiona, who felt bad in her heart, was thinking about how to continue talking, when suddenly Riveria's serious voice came from behind. "No, it is necessary to combine work and rest. Although you are already level 5, excessive fatigue will still destroy your spirit, which is not good for your growth. Don't damage your future because of temporary greed, Ace." Walking briskly from the back, Riveria walked over to Ace and tapped her on the head lightly to teach her a lesson. "Riveria, be strict." Knowing that she couldn't resist Riveria, Ace held her head and said with a little emotion. "For you, strictness is necessary. She looked at Ace angrily, and then turned her attention to Tiona and Tioni who were beside her. Seeing this, the two quickly looked in other directions, as if they didn't know anything, and whistled briskly. Don't be angry, Riveria, I'm about to go home soon, it's better to be happy. Looking at the gathered crowd, Finn, who had completed his explanation, also stepped forward and interjected. Captain. Seeing Finn's figure, Dione quickly leaned over. Seeing that Tiona, who was supported by the head of the regiment, was also very happy to repeat the old words, yes, this is the happy time to go home, how can you be so serious? As expected of a miscellaneous fish, you don't want to come back when you think about going back all day, how good it is to watch the door at home. Bert, you bastard! Seeing that Bert was actually mocking herself, Tiona immediately quarreled with him in dissatisfaction. For a while, it became very lively here. Really, can't you just calm down? It's been noisy all day. Holding her forehead, Rivia felt helpless. You two, give me peace. Smashing the staff to the ground fiercely, Riveria shouted extremely sternly. Due to her imposing manner, Tiona and Bert, who were arguing, immediately closed their mouths and stood there uneasy and regretting. Annoyed Riveria, but there will be no good fruit to eat. Just as Riveria was about to preach, a roar suddenly came. Ho ho ho! This is Gloria resurrected. Is it such a coincidence? Seeing this, Tiona immediately shouted loudly, I'm going to crusade against Gloria and open a path for everyone. Looking at Tiona who was about to slip away, Bert said quickly, me too. And Ace, who was on the side, saw the battle and said, I'll go too. Soon, the trio disappeared in front of Riveria. Looking at this scene, Riveria said with a headache, what a group of problem children. Ha ha ha. Seeing this, Finn, who was watching the play, laughed out loud when Griston. Swing the sword, keep swinging the sword. Run, run, keep running. Emi Yashiro, who has been fighting since he entered the middle floor, kept killing the monster in front of him, and he felt exhausted as he never stopped. But he can't stop, he is only one person, once he stops, he will be surrounded, and then he will be in a hard fight. In this case, the battle will be dominated by the dungeon, which is extremely bad for him. Therefore, he cannot stop. Thankfully, he brought a lot of supplies in advance. Emi Yashiro took out an elixir from the backpack behind him and poured it into his mouth. Emi Yashiro clearly felt that his body became warm, and his exhaustion was swept away. Of course, this is just an illusion, the effect of elixir cannot be so good. But he still provided Emi Yashiro with a lot of physical strength. This is the elixir commonly used by adventurers, namely the physical elixir to restore physical strength and the spiritual elixir to restore mental power. And the one that recovers the injury is the high-level elixir, and the top-level high-level elixir is also called the panacea. A bottle of elixir is worth as much as 500,000 farleys, which is not something ordinary adventurers can afford. Give me death! Several sword suits were projected, and instantly penetrated the monster group in front. Emi Yashiro is now in the second half of the 15th floor. In addition to the unicorn rabbit and hellhound, there is a new monster, the Minotaur. The Minotaur. This is a monster with extremely powerful combat power. In the original work, it was called the psychological shadow of the protagonist Bell in the early stage. After he crossed this shadow, he reached the level of LV.2. In the entire LV.2 level, the Minotaurs are the top beings and can be called elite monsters. And now it was the Minotaur who appeared in front of Emi Yashiro. Staring at the huge and sturdy monster on the opposite side, Shiro Emiya was thinking constantly in his heart, with my current stat level of Leave 1, I am afraid it will be difficult to cut through him even if I use Emosyet. After all, Emosyet is just a dagger. Then, let's use Emosyet, a stronger officer, to deal with the enemy. The crane wing will not owe a debt, the heart will reach Mount Tai, the heart will cross the Yellow River, only the name is Bayanadian, and the two heroes will die. As he recited the inscription engraved on Mosye's body, the two short swords in his hand began to change dramatically under his constant strengthening. The original short sword was visible to the naked eye and turned into two large swords, which were swung in the hands of Emiya Shiro. "Let me show you your strength." Emiya Shiro, who stepped heavily on his feet and suddenly accelerated, quickly appeared in front of the Minotaur at the front. As his body flashed past the opponent's attack, Emiya Shiro directly slashed it into two pieces with his sword. "It doesn't look like you're anything special, don't you?" Feeling the blood spilled from the Minotaur, Shiro Emiya couldn't help but slightly raise the corners of his mouth. "Right now, I'm in high spirits, don't let me down." After saying that, he rushed up to the Minotaur's roar. "Comfortable. After waking up in the morning and exercising, it really feels more refreshing." Walking right in front of the team, Tiona slaughtered the Minotaur in front of her while talking to Ace next to her. "Okay. In this regard, Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Ace also nodded in agreement. "Don't be careless, the next step is the passage to the 15th floor. The road is very narrow, and the next step is a cliff, so be careful." Looking at Tiona, who was absent-minded during the battle, Riveria, who was behind them, immediately warned. "Yes." Tiona became serious in an instant. "Speaking of which, there are too many monsters in the passage on the right, it's a little abnormal." Finn, who has been observing the surroundings all the time, said seriously. "This is the connection point before the passage leading to the 15th floor. There are shafts leading to the lower floor all around. The only passage is like a stone bridge between two cliffs. There are as many as 6 or 7 such stone bridges, all of which lead to the 15th floor. Although there are usually monsters on it, there are never so many." Hearing Finn's doubts, the cotters of the Loki familiar who were walking at the front of the road could not help but look at the stone bridge, but before they could analyze and speak, an arrow shot out of the passage and flew to the stone bridge. Boom! The violent explosion rose in an instant, and even Finn and the others could feel the strong storm. The sudden explosion was like a signal for war, and the monsters that were not affected by the explosion rushed forward one after another in the direction where the arrows came from. Ah ah ah! With a roar, the figure of a young man rushed out of the passage and went straight to the monster group on the opposite side. And at this thrilling moment, Shiro Emiya finally met the pillars of his family. But at this moment, he has no energy to focus on other things. Right now, he only has battle in his eyes.